Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
The family group chat notification lit up my phone at exactly 3:15 on a Wednesday afternoon. My younger brother Jake had sent a message that made my blood freeze. "Don't come to the weekend barbecue. My new wife says you'll make the whole party stink." Within seconds, I watched the likes pile up from my parents, my aunt, even my cousin, who barely knew me. The little thumbs-up icons felt like daggers, each one a vote of agreement that I was somehow beneath them. I stared at my phone screen in my corner office, 20 floors above downtown, surrounded by the mahogany furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected my success. My waste management empire stretched across 3 states, employed over 300 people, and generated millions in revenue annually. Yet here I was, reduced to the family embarrassment because I worked with garbage. I typed back just 2 words. Understood. What my family didn't know was that I had just discovered something that would change everything about our relationship forever. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in my leather chair, looking out at the city skyline. Here they were, calling me dirty, when I had built something clean and honest from the ground up. 7 years ago, I started Pinnacle Waste Solutions, with a single truck and a dream. Now, we had a fleet of 200 vehicles, contracts with major corporations, and a reputation for innovation in recycling and environmental protection. My office walls displayed awards for business excellence and community service. But my family had never set foot in this building to see what I had accomplished. 3 days before Jake's humiliating text, my head accountant Sarah Chen had knocked on my door with a manila folder that would turn my world upside down. Her usually calm demeanor seemed shaken as she placed bank statements and financial documents across my desk. The numbers told a story that made my stomach turn. "Nelson, I think you need to see this," she had said, pointing to a series of transactions highlighted in yellow. "These are from your grandfather's trust fund account. The patterns are concerning." I studied the documents carefully. Edwin Hartwell, my 90-year-old grandfather, was a Korean War veteran who had worked as a machinist for 40 years before retiring. He owned his home outright, had a substantial pension, and had always been careful with money. The trust fund contained his life savings, nearly $400,000, managed by someone he trusted completely, my brother Jake. The bank statements showed a disturbing pattern. Over the past 6 months, there had been regular withdrawals of $5,000, $8,000, $12,000. Each withdrawal was authorized by Jake's signature as the appointed financial advisor. But when I cross-referenced the dates with grandfather's actual expenses, nothing added up. Grandfather lived simply in his small house, drove a 15-year-old truck, and his monthly expenses rarely exceeded $2,000. Sarah had done her due diligence. She pulled credit reports, payment histories, and even medical records that grandfather had authorized me to access years ago when I helped him set up his estate planning. There was no evidence of major medical bills, home repairs, or any legitimate reason for these massive withdrawals. "Look at this," Sarah said, sliding another document toward me. It showed Jake's personal bank account, which she had accessed through a financial background check we routinely performed for family members involved in our business dealings. Jake's account showed deposits that perfectly matched the missing money from grandfather's trust, always occurring within 24 hours of the withdrawals. My hands trembled as I realized what I was looking at. My brother, the family golden boy who had always been praised for his charm and intelligence, was stealing from our grandfather. The man who had raised us during summers, taught us how to fish, and told us stories about serving his country, was being robbed by his own grandson. But the theft went deeper than money. Sarah had found forged documents, signatures that didn't match grandfather's handwriting, and authorization forms that had never been properly witnessed. Jake wasn't just taking money, he was systematically destroying the financial security of a 90-year-old war veteran who trusted him completely. I thought about all the times Jake had bragged about his financial expertise, his business degree, his sophisticated understanding of investments. Meanwhile, he was using that knowledge to steal from the one person in our family who had always been kind to everyone. Grandfather Edwin had never played favorites, never made anyone feel less worthy, never excluded anyone from family gatherings. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I had planned to attend the barbecue specifically to spend time with grandfather and to privately confront Jake about these discrepancies. I had hoped there was an innocent explanation, some misunderstanding that could be cleared up quietly within the family. Now, with Jake's text excluding me from the gathering, I understood this was something much darker. As I sat in my office, holding the evidence of my brother's crimes, I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak that I had never experienced before. The family that had always made me feel ashamed of honest work was harboring a real criminal. They thought I was the embarrassment when Jake was stealing from the most vulnerable member of our family. The next morning, I couldn't concentrate on work. Every time I tried to review contracts or approve new accounts, my mind wandered back to that group chat and the years of subtle and not so subtle rejection that had led to this moment. I decided I needed to understand exactly how we had reached this point, so I called in some favors from my business network. Growing up, Jake and I couldn't have been more different. He was 3 years younger, charming, quick-witted, and naturally gifted at making people like him. I was serious, hard-working, and more comfortable with machines and systems than with people. Our parents, both high school teachers named Robert and Linda, had always made it clear which son they preferred. When Jake scored the winning touchdown in high school, they threw him a party and invited the whole neighborhood. When I graduated valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to study business and environmental science, they took me to dinner at a chain restaurant and spent most of the meal talking about Jake's latest girlfriend. The pattern continued through college, where Jake studied finance and business while I focused on industrial management and environmental policy. After graduation, Jake landed a job at a prestigious financial planning firm downtown, while I started my waste management company. Our parents' reaction to our career choices told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in the family hierarchy. Jake was introduced to their friends as our son, the financial advisor, while I was either not mentioned at all or referred to as Nelson, who works in sanitation. What hurt the most was that they never bothered to learn what my business actually involved. Pinnacle Waste Solutions wasn't just a garbage collection company. We specialized in environmentally sustainable waste management, advanced recycling technologies, and helping corporations reduce their environmental footprint. I had developed partnerships with universities to research new methods of waste-to-energy conversion. My company had won awards from environmental groups and business organizations alike. But I needed to know if my suspicions about my family's true feelings were accurate, so I hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb. Marcus was a former police detective who specialized in background investigations for corporate clients. I asked him to look into my family's financial situation and social connections, claiming I needed the information for potential business partnerships. What Marcus discovered over the next 48 hours shattered what little hope I had left for family reconciliation. Through social media analysis, public records, and discreet inquiries, he uncovered a web of deception that went back years. My parents had been showing off my business cards to their colleagues and friends for the past 3 years. Linda had posted photos on Facebook of newspaper articles featuring my company's environmental initiatives, always with captions about how proud they were of their successful son. Robert had mentioned my business in parent-teacher conferences, using my success to elevate his own status among other faculty members. Yet, during this same period, they had systematically excluded me from family gatherings, holiday celebrations, and important milestones. Marcus found evidence through social media posts and public records that there had been at least 12 major family events in the past 2 years that I was never invited to. Birthday parties, anniversary celebrations, graduation parties for cousins, even a funeral for a distant relative that everyone else attended. The most painful discovery was a series of text messages Marcus obtained through legal channels during his investigation. My parents had been discussing my exclusion from family events in a group chat that included Jake, his wife Amanda, and several extended family members. The messages revealed their true feelings with brutal clarity. "Nelson thinks he's better than us now with his fancy office," my mother had written. but he still smells like garbage trucks. At least Jake knows how to dress and act appropriately in social situations, my father had added. Nelson would embarrass us in front of Amanda's family. Amanda, Jake's wife of 8 months, had been particularly vocal about keeping me away from family functions. According to the messages, she came from what she claimed was an old money family in Connecticut and was horrified by the idea of being associated with someone in the waste management industry. She had convinced Jake that my presence would damage their social standing and hurt Jake's career prospects. The investigation revealed that Amanda had been pressuring Jake to completely cut ties with me, suggesting that my success was somehow illegitimate or that I was involved in illegal activities. She had planted seeds of doubt about my business practices, my character, and even my loyalty to the family. But the most shocking discovery was financial. Marcus found records showing that for the past 4 years, I had been anonymously contributing to various family expenses. When my parents' health insurance premiums increased, I had quietly arranged for additional coverage through my company's group plan. When their aging roof needed replacement, I had sent an anonymous donation through a local charity that covered the entire cost. When Jake needed help with his college loan payments during a period of unemployment, I had arranged for those payments to be made through a scholarship fund I had established. My family had been benefiting from my generosity for years, while simultaneously treating me like an unwanted burden. They had taken my help while rejecting my presence, accepted my money while mocking my work, and used my success to boost their own reputations while excluding me from their lives. As I processed this information, I realized that the barbecue exclusion wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of calculated rejection, orchestrated by Amanda, and enabled by parents who were more concerned with social appearances than family loyalty. Armed with this devastating knowledge about my family's true feelings, I decided to dig deeper into Jake's financial crimes. If they wanted to treat me like an outsider, I would investigate this situation with the same professional detachment I brought to my business dealings. I expanded my team to include a forensic accountant named Patricia Williams and gave Marcus a broader mandate to investigate Jake and Amanda's activities. What we discovered over the next week made the initial theft seem minor by comparison. Jake hadn't just been stealing money from grandfather's trust fund. He had been systematically positioning himself to take everything the old man owned. Patricia's analysis of the financial records revealed a sophisticated scheme that had been in motion for over a year. Jake had used his position as grandfather's financial advisor to slowly gain control over every aspect of the elderly man's finances. It started small, with Jake convincing grandfather to consolidate all his accounts under Jake's management for simplification and security. Once Jake had access to the accounts, he began forging documents. Patricia found evidence of at least 15 forged signatures on various financial forms. Jake had created false investment reports showing steady losses in grandfather's portfolio, explaining away the missing money as market volatility and poor economic conditions. He had even produced fake bills and invoices for services that were never provided. But the most horrifying discovery was a set of legal documents that Jake had filed with the county clerk's office. Using a power of attorney that appeared to have been forged, Jake had initiated proceedings to have himself declared grandfather's legal guardian. The paperwork claimed that Edwin was suffering from dementia and was no longer capable of managing his own affairs. Marcus's investigation revealed that Jake had scheduled a competency hearing for the following month. He had arranged for a doctor to evaluate grandfather's mental state, using a physician who had never actually examined the old man. The goal was clear. Once Jake was declared grandfather's legal guardian, he would have unlimited access to all assets and the authority to make decisions about living arrangements. The real estate records showed the most chilling aspect of the scheme. Grandfather's house, which sat on 2 acres of prime property just outside the city limits, was worth approximately $800,000. Local developers had been pressuring elderly residents in the area to sell, offering substantial sums for land they wanted to convert into luxury condominiums. Jake had already been in contact with 3 different developers, obtaining preliminary offers for the property. He had scheduled a formal appraisal for the week after the barbecue, claiming to the appraiser that he was acting on behalf of his grandfather who was considering selling due to health concerns. Meanwhile, Jake had been researching nursing homes in the area. Marcus found internet searches on Jake's computer for affordable long-term care facilities and memory care units for elderly patients. Jake had even visited 2 facilities, telling administrators that he might need to place his grandfather in their care within the next few months due to declining mental health. The timeline was becoming clear. Jake planned to have grandfather declared incompetent, sell the house, take control of all remaining assets, and warehouse the old man in the cheapest nursing facility he could find. The total value of grandfather's estate, including the house, savings, pension funds, and other assets, exceeded $1.2 million. But Marcus's investigation into Amanda revealed the most disturbing truth of all. Amanda Chen wasn't her real name, and she certainly wasn't from an old money Connecticut family. Her real name was Amy Caldwell, and she had a criminal record spanning 3 states. Using facial recognition technology and background databases, Marcus discovered that Amanda had been arrested twice for elder fraud in Nevada and once for identity theft in Arizona. In each case, she had targeted families with elderly members who possessed significant assets. Her method was always the same: research potential victims through public records and social media, identify the weakest or most manipulable family member, develop a romantic relationship with that person, then use them to gain access to elderly relatives' finances. In Nevada, she had convinced a man named David Morrison to steal over $300,000 from his grandmother before disappearing just before the wedding they had been planning. In Arizona, she had manipulated a recently divorced man named Thomas Reed into forging his father's signature on property deeds. Both men had been prosecuted for the crimes while Amanda disappeared, only to resurface months later with a new identity. The pattern was identical to what was happening with Jake. Amanda had researched our family through news articles about my business, social media posts, and public records. She had identified Jake as the family member most likely to be susceptible to manipulation and had orchestrated their meeting at a charity event sponsored by my company. Marcus found evidence that Amanda had been planning this scheme for over 2 years. She had created a false background, complete with fake social media profiles, manufactured family history, and even staged photographs that suggested wealth and social status. She had studied our family dynamics and crafted her approach specifically to exploit Jake's resentment toward me and his desire for recognition. The most chilling discovery was Amanda's exit strategy. Marcus found airline reservations in her real name for a flight to Costa Rica, scheduled for 3 days after the house sale was supposed to be completed. She had rented a safe deposit box under a false name where she was storing cash and jewelry. She had even researched countries with no extradition treaties with the United States. Amanda planned to disappear with the money, leaving Jake to face the legal consequences alone. She had positioned herself to claim ignorance of any wrongdoing, portraying herself as an innocent wife who trusted her husband's business decisions. Jake would be left holding the bag for elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and theft, while Amanda started a new life in another country. As I sat in my office, reviewing the mountain of evidence my team had compiled, I felt a mixture of rage and disgust that threatened to overwhelm me. My brother wasn't just stealing from our grandfather. He was being used as a puppet in a sophisticated criminal enterprise. The woman he thought he loved was planning to destroy his life and abandon him to face federal charges. But what hurt the most was the realization that grandfather Edwin, the kindest and most generous member of our family, was being systematically robbed and betrayed by the people he trusted most. The man who had served his country with honor, worked hard his entire life, and always treated his family with love and respect, was being set up to spend his final years alone and abandoned in institutional care. I spent the weekend after Jake's humiliating text message, carefully planning my next moves. The evidence against him and Amanda was overwhelming, but I needed to catch them in the act to ensure they couldn't escape justice. More importantly, I needed to protect grandfather from any further harm while building an airtight case that would expose their crimes completely. My first step was to visit grandfather Edwin without telling anyone else in the family. I drove to his modest house on Sunday morning, bringing fresh coffee and donuts from his favorite bakery. What I found there broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. Grandfather answered the door looking confused and worried. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his bills were scattered across the kitchen table, and he seemed genuinely distressed about his financial situation. He had always been sharp as a tack, managing his own affairs with precision and pride. Now, thanks to Jake's manipulation, he was questioning his own mental abilities. "Nelson, I'm so glad you're here," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I've been having trouble with my bank accounts. Jake says there are problems with the markets, but I can't make sense of the statements he brings me. My pension checks seem smaller than they used to be, and there are bills I don't remember receiving." I spent 3 hours with him, carefully reviewing his financial situation without revealing what I knew. Grandfather showed me a stack of documents Jake had brought him, claiming they were investment reports and account summaries. Every single document was falsified. Jake had created fake letterheads, forged bank statements, and manufactured investment reports that showed steady losses to explain the missing money. The cruelest part was how Jake had been gaslighting the old man. Whenever Grandfather questioned discrepancies or expressed concern about his finances, Jake would suggest that his memory wasn't what it used to be and that he should trust younger, more financially sophisticated family members to handle these complex matters. "Jake keeps telling me I should consider moving to a place where I'd have more help with daily activities," Grandfather told me. "He says, this house is too much for me to maintain and that I'd be safer in a facility with medical care available. But Nelson, I don't want to leave this house. Your grandmother and I lived here for 45 years. Every room has memories." I assured Grandfather that his mind was sharp and his concerns were valid, but I didn't reveal the extent of Jake's crimes yet. I needed to coordinate with law enforcement to ensure that when the truth came out, Grandfather would be protected and the stolen assets would be recovered. Over the next few days, I worked with Patricia and Marcus to build relationships with the appropriate authorities. We contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, the State Attorney General's office, and local police, who specialized in elder abuse cases. The evidence we had compiled impressed even experienced investigators. Special Agent Rebecca Torres from the FBI agreed to coordinate a sting operation that would catch Jake and Amanda in the act while protecting Grandfather from further harm. The plan required careful timing and cooperation between multiple agencies, but Agent Torres felt confident that we could build a case that would result in federal charges and substantial prison time for both perpetrators. The key was to create a situation where Jake and Amanda would incriminate themselves while being recorded by law enforcement. We needed them to admit to their crimes, reveal their future plans, and demonstrate their intent to continue the fraud. Agent Torres suggested that I contact Jake directly, creating a scenario where he would feel compelled to visit my office with Amanda. This is where my knowledge of Jake's psychology became crucial. Despite his criminal behavior, my brother had always been driven by a need to prove himself superior to me. He had spent our entire childhood competing for parental attention and approval, and that competitive instinct was still strong even as an adult. I crafted a text message that would appeal to Jake's ego while creating urgency around a fake business crisis. The message needed to convince him that I was vulnerable and needed his help, something that would be irresistible to someone who had always felt overshadowed by my success. "Jake, I need your help urgently," I wrote. "There's a crisis with my city contracts that could shut down my entire business. Someone is claiming irregularities in my waste disposal permits and threatening to pull all municipal agreements. I need someone with financial expertise who can help me restructure some accounts quickly to avoid bankruptcy. Can you meet me at my office tomorrow morning? I need someone I can trust completely. Maybe bring Amanda since she understands high-level business transactions. This is life or death for my company." The message was carefully crafted to push several psychological buttons. First, it appealed to Jake's desire to see me fail by suggesting that my business empire might collapse. Second, it positioned him as the financial expert who could save the day, feeding his need for recognition and superiority. Third, It suggested that I trusted him completely, which would lower his guard and make him more likely to reveal incriminating information. Most importantly, the message created artificial urgency around financial transactions, which would give law enforcement the opportunity to record Jake and Amanda discussing their ongoing crimes and future plans. If they believed I was desperate to move money quickly to save my business, they might reveal details about how they had been moving grandfather's stolen funds. Jake's response came within an hour. Finally, you realize you need family help. Amanda and I will be there at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Don't worry, we'll figure out how to save your business. The arrogance in his message was breathtaking. Here was someone who was stealing from our grandfather, planning to warehouse him in a nursing home, and destroying our family's trust, yet he had the audacity to act like he was doing me a favor by agreeing to help. Agent Torres worked with building security to install recording equipment in my office and position undercover agents throughout the building. The plan was to let Jake and Amanda incriminate themselves through natural conversation, then confront them with the evidence of their crimes against grandfather. If everything went according to plan, they would be arrested on the spot with enough evidence to ensure conviction on multiple federal charges. As I prepared for the confrontation, I thought about all the years of family dysfunction that had led to this moment. The parents who had chosen favorites instead of loving their children equally, the brother who had chosen crime over honest work, the sister-in-law who had chosen manipulation over genuine love, and the grandfather who had done nothing wrong except trust the people who should have protected him. Tomorrow morning would determine whether justice would be served or whether the criminals would continue destroying our family from within. Either way, I was done being the family scapegoat while real crimes were being committed by the people who claimed moral superiority. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cold, with a November wind that rattled the windows of my 20th floor office. I arrived early to coordinate with Agent Torres and her team, who had been working since dawn to ensure that every aspect of our operation would proceed flawlessly. The recording equipment was invisible, hidden within the normal furnishings of my office, and backup agents were positioned throughout the building. At exactly 9 o'clock, building security called to inform me that Jake and Amanda had arrived and were on their way up. I positioned myself behind my desk, surrounded by the legitimate awards and achievements that represented 7 years of honest work, and waited for the confrontation that would expose the truth about my family's real criminal. When my office door opened, Jake strode in with his characteristic confidence, wearing an expensive suit that I now realized had been purchased with stolen money. Amanda followed close behind, and I had to suppress a shock of recognition when I saw her clearly for the first time in months. Marcus's investigation had shown me her real face in mugshot photos, but seeing her in person confirmed that everything about her appearance was carefully calculated to project wealth and sophistication. "Nelson, you look terrible," Jake said, settling into one of my leather chairs with casual arrogance. "I guess the stress of potentially losing everything is getting to you. Lucky thing you have family who can help you figure out how to move money around without attracting attention from the authorities." Amanda smiled with false sympathy, her voice dripping with condescension. "Jake has told me so much about your business struggles. It must be difficult to maintain this facade of success when your company is built on such an unstable foundation. But don't worry, we understand how these things work. Sometimes you have to be creative with accounting to keep everything afloat." I pretended to be grateful for their presence, playing the role of desperate businessman who needed their expertise. "I've been trying to figure out how to move large amounts of money quickly without triggering government oversight. The permits issue is worse than I thought, and I might need to restructure everything within the next few weeks." Jake leaned forward eagerly, clearly excited by the prospect of demonstrating his superior knowledge. "The key is to break large transactions into smaller amounts and use multiple accounts to avoid detection. You can also use family members or trusted associates to help distribute funds so that no single person appears to be handling suspicious amounts." "Exactly," Amanda added, her voice taking on a professional tone that revealed her experience with financial crimes. "I've helped other clients restructure their assets during difficult periods. The important thing is to move quickly before anyone can trace the full scope of your financial situation." Sometimes you even need to create documentation that shows alternative explanations for how the money was obtained or used. Agent Torres had been right about criminals' tendency to reveal their methods when they believed they were helping someone else commit similar crimes. Jake and Amanda were essentially confessing to money laundering and fraud while thinking they were giving me advice about legitimate business transactions. I pushed them further, asking specific questions about how they would handle documentation and record-keeping for the kind of financial maneuvering I was supposedly considering. Their answers revealed detailed knowledge of forgery techniques, methods for avoiding banking regulations, and strategies for creating false paper trails. After 20 minutes of this conversation, I had enough incriminating evidence to support federal charges, but I wanted them to reveal their specific crimes against grandfather. I mentioned that I had been thinking about asking family members to help me manage some of the financial restructuring. Actually, I said, I've been wondering if grandfather Edwin might be able to help with some of these transitions. He has substantial assets that could potentially be used as collateral or temporary funding sources. Jake's expression changed immediately, becoming defensive and suspicious. Grandfather's finances are off limits, Nelson. I'm his financial advisor, and I can tell you that his mental state has been deteriorating rapidly. He's not capable of making major financial decisions anymore, and frankly, you shouldn't be involving him in your business problems. Amanda's mask slipped slightly, revealing a calculating coldness that chilled me. Elderly people are vulnerable to financial exploitation, Nelson. It would be inappropriate and potentially illegal to involve your grandfather in business transactions when he's not mentally competent to understand the risks involved. The irony of receiving lectures about elder abuse from people who were actively stealing from a 90-year-old war veteran was almost too much to bear. But their defensive reaction told me everything I needed to know about their consciousness of guilt regarding their treatment of grandfather. I decided it was time to reveal the truth. That's interesting advice about protecting elderly family members from financial exploitation, I said, my voice taking on a harder edge. Because I've been doing some research into grandfather's financial situation, and I've discovered some very disturbing patterns. Jake's face went white, while Amanda's expression became carefully neutral. What kind of patterns? Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I opened the manila folder that Patricia had prepared and spread the bank statements, forged documents, and financial records across my desk. Patterns that show systematic theft of over $200,000 from grandfather's trust fund. Patterns that show forged signatures on multiple legal documents. Patterns that show someone has been gaslighting a 90-year-old man while stealing his life savings and planning to steal his house. The room fell completely silent, except for the sound of Amanda's sharp intake of breath. Jake's hands were trembling as he stared at the evidence spread before him. For the first time in his life, my charming, confident younger brother was speechless. I know about the fake investment reports, I continued. I know about the forged power of attorney documents. I know about your plans to have grandfather declared incompetent so you can sell his house and put him in a nursing home. And I know that your wife isn't who she claims to be. Amanda stood up abruptly, her careful facade finally cracking completely. I don't know what you think you've discovered, but you're clearly mistaken about Amy Caldwell, I interrupted, using her real name. Arrested twice in Nevada for elder fraud, wanted in Arizona for identity theft. Currently planning to flee the country 3 days after grandfather's house sale is completed, leaving Jake to face federal charges alone. The transformation in Amanda's appearance was remarkable. The sophisticated socialite disappeared, replaced by a hardened criminal who realized her carefully planned scheme was falling apart. She looked around the office desperately, as if searching for an escape route. Jake, meanwhile, seemed to be processing the full scope of what was happening. How did you? Who told you? Nelson. I can explain everything. The FBI can explain everything, I said, pressing the button under my desk that signaled Agent Torres and her team, because everything you've said in the last 30 minutes has been recorded as evidence for your upcoming trial. The office door opened immediately, and Agent Torres entered with 3 other federal agents, Jacob Hartwell and Amy Caldwell, You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse, wire fraud, forgery, and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent." Amanda tried to run, but agents were positioned outside the office door. Jake simply sat in stunned silence as handcuffs were placed on his wrists, staring at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. "This is why the family never wanted you around," he said, as agents prepared to escort him from the office. "You always thought you were better than everyone else. Now you've destroyed your own brother over money." I looked at Jake directly, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. "I didn't destroy you, Jake. You destroyed yourself when you chose to steal from the kindest member of our family. Grandfather Edwin deserved better from his grandson." As agents led them away, I sat alone in my office for the first time in hours, processing the emotional whirlwind of the morning. The confrontation was over, but the real work of healing our broken family was just beginning. The weeks following Jake and Amanda's arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, family revelations, and emotional reckonings that would reshape our relationships forever. Agent Torres kept me informed about the progress of the federal investigation, and what they discovered exceeded even my worst expectations about the scope of the crimes. Amanda's real identity as Amy Caldwell opened up investigations in multiple states, revealing that our family had been targeted as part of a sophisticated criminal enterprise. The FBI discovered that she had been operating with a network of accomplices who specialized in researching vulnerable families, identifying potential marks, and executing long-term fraud schemes. Our family was her fourth target in 5 years. The financial investigation revealed that Jake and Amanda had stolen over $320,000 from grandfather's accounts, far more than my initial estimate. They had been preparing to steal an additional $800,000 from the house sale, which would have left grandfather Edwin with virtually nothing after a lifetime of careful saving and responsible financial management. But perhaps the most devastating revelation came when Agent Torres contacted other victims of Amanda's previous schemes. The families in Nevada and Arizona shared heartbreakingly similar stories of manipulation, theft, and family destruction. In each case, Amanda had successfully turned family members against each other while systematically looting elderly relatives' assets. 2 victims in Nevada had died in substandard nursing homes after their assets were stolen, never knowing that their trusted family members had betrayed them. Jake's role in the scheme became clearer during FBI interviews and psychological evaluations. While he was clearly guilty of serious crimes, it became apparent that Amanda had exploited his existing resentments and insecurities to manipulate him into increasingly serious illegal acts. She had identified his jealousy toward me, his desire for parental approval, and his need to prove himself as vulnerabilities she could exploit. The psychological profile painted a picture of someone who had made terrible choices, but had also been systematically manipulated by a professional criminal. Jake's statements to investigators revealed that Amanda had gradually escalated his involvement in the scheme, starting with small financial irregularities and progressing to major theft and fraud. By the time he realized the full scope of what they were planning, he felt trapped and afraid to back out. Meanwhile, the impact on our family was swift and devastating. When news of the arrests became public, my parents' carefully constructed social image crumbled overnight. Their teaching colleagues, neighborhood friends, and extended family members learned that their golden child was a federal criminal who had been stealing from his own grandfather. The revelation that I had been anonymously supporting the family for years, while being excluded from their lives, created an additional layer of shame and guilt that my parents struggled to process. Patricia's financial analysis revealed the full scope of my secret generosity: over $60,000 in anonymous contributions to family expenses over 4 years, including medical bills, home repairs, educational costs, and emergency assistance. My mother Linda called me 3 days after the arrest, sobbing uncontrollably as she tried to apologize for years of rejection and ingratitude. "Nelson, I don't know how to face you after what we've done. We treated you terribly while you were secretly taking care of us, and Jake. I can't believe our son could do something so horrible to his own grandfather." My father's reaction was even more profound. Robert had always prided himself on his ability to judge character and understand people's motivations. Learning that he had completely misjudged both of his sons shattered his confidence in his own perceptions and forced him to confront years of favoritism and poor decisions. The most heartbreaking conversation was with grandfather Edwin himself. When Agent Torres and I sat down with him to explain what had happened, his initial reaction was disbelief, then profound sadness, and finally, a quiet dignity that reminded me why he had always been the family member I most respected. "I should have known something was wrong," he said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. Jake seemed different these past months, more secretive, more impatient with my questions. But I trusted him because he was family. I never imagined that my own grandson would steal from me. The conversation that followed was one of the most meaningful of my life. Grandfather Edwin apologized for not recognizing my achievements and for allowing the family to exclude me from important events. He admitted that he had been aware of the family dynamics, but had failed to speak up when he should have defended me. "You were always the reliable one, Nelson," he said. "Even as a child, you were honest, hard-working, and kind to people regardless of their circumstances. I should have made sure the family recognized those qualities, instead of allowing them to focus on superficial things like job prestige and social status." We spent hours talking about family history, shared memories, and the values that really mattered. Grandfather Edwin expressed pride in what I had built with my business, not because of the financial success, but because of the honest work it represented and the positive impact it had on the community. The legal proceedings moved forward with remarkable efficiency thanks to the overwhelming evidence and Jake's eventual cooperation with authorities. Faced with the possibility of decades in federal prison, Jake agreed to plead guilty to multiple charges and testify against Amanda's criminal network in exchange for a reduced sentence. Amanda, meanwhile, fought the charges aggressively, hiring expensive lawyers and attempting to portray herself as an innocent victim of Jake's criminal schemes. However, the evidence against her was overwhelming, and her previous criminal history made her claims of innocence impossible to believe. The federal prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Chen, told me that our case had helped break open a multi-state criminal enterprise that had victimized dozens of elderly Americans. Amanda's network had been operating for over a decade, and our successful sting operation provided crucial evidence that would help convict other members of the organization. During this period, I made several important decisions about how to move forward with family relationships. Despite the years of rejection and the recent criminal betrayal, I chose to approach the situation with compassion rather than revenge. I arranged for family counseling sessions that would help us process the trauma and rebuild trust where possible. I also made arrangements for grandfather Edwin's care that would ensure his remaining years would be comfortable and dignified. Rather than the cheap nursing facility Jake had planned, I found a beautiful assisted living community that specialized in caring for veterans. The facility had extensive grounds, excellent medical care, and a community of residents who shared grandfather's interests and experiences. Most importantly, I established legal protections that would prevent any future exploitation of grandfather's assets, while ensuring he maintained autonomy over his own life decisions. The stolen money was recovered through asset forfeiture proceedings, and I helped establish a properly managed trust that would provide for grandfather's needs while protecting him from financial abuse. 6 months after that devastating morning in my office, I sat across from Jake in the visiting room of the minimum security federal prison where he was serving his sentence. The transformation in my younger brother was remarkable and heartbreaking. The arrogant, well-dressed financial advisor had been replaced by a thin, humbled man who looked older than his 29 years. "Nelson, I know there's nothing I can say that will make up for what I did," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've had months to think about my choices, and I realized that I destroyed everything that mattered because I was jealous of what you had built. Amanda manipulated me, but I made the decision to steal from grandfather. I have to live with that for the rest of my life." The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. Jake explained how Amanda had gradually convinced him that he deserved more recognition from the family and that I had somehow stolen opportunities that should have been his. She had exploited his resentment and insecurity, turning him against the people who loved him while using him to commit increasingly serious crimes. "I thought I was smarter than everyone else," Jake admitted. "I believed Amanda when she told me that business success was about being willing to bend rules and take risks. She made theft seem like sophisticated financial planning, and I was too arrogant to see that she was using me." Jake's remorse seemed genuine, and his acceptance of responsibility was complete. He had been attending counseling sessions in prison, working with a therapist who specialized in helping people understand how they had been manipulated while still taking ownership of their choices. The psychological work was helping him process years of poor decisions and family dysfunction. I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. Despite everything Jake had done, I established a trust fund that would provide for his education and rehabilitation while he served his sentence. The fund would pay for vocational training, continuing education, and eventually help him transition back into society when his sentence was completed. "Why are you doing this?" Jake asked, tears streaming down his face. "After everything I did to grandfather, to the family, to you, why would you help me?" I thought carefully before answering. "Because holding on to anger would only hurt me, Jake. You made terrible choices, but you're still my brother. Grandfather Edwin would want me to believe in second chances, and I think you can become a better person if you're given the opportunity." The prison visit was part of a larger process of family healing that had been ongoing for months. My parents had been attending individual and family therapy sessions, working through years of favoritism, poor communication, and misplaced priorities. The experience had forced them to confront some uncomfortable truths about how their parenting choices had contributed to the family dysfunction. My mother Linda had written me a lengthy letter explaining her perspective on our family history and taking responsibility for the ways she had failed both of her sons. She acknowledged that her preference for Jake's charm over my reliability had created an unhealthy dynamic that hurt everyone involved. "I thought Jake needed more support because he seemed less capable of taking care of himself," she wrote. "I didn't realize that by constantly praising his superficial qualities while ignoring your substantial achievements, I was teaching both of you that appearance mattered more than character. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." My father Robert's journey had been more difficult. As someone who prided himself on understanding human nature, the realization that he had completely misjudged his own sons forced him to question many of his fundamental beliefs about people and relationships. He had always believed that charm and social skills were indicators of future success, while viewing my serious demeanor as a limitation. The therapy sessions revealed that both parents had been influenced by their own upbringings and social pressures in ways they hadn't fully understood. They came from backgrounds where appearance and social status were highly valued, and they had unconsciously passed those values onto their children without considering the potential consequences. Grandfather Edwin had become the emotional center of our family's healing process. Despite being the primary victim of Jake's crimes, he had chosen forgiveness and compassion over bitterness and revenge. His new living situation at the assisted living community had given him a renewed sense of purpose and joy that was inspiring to everyone around him. "You know, Nelson," he told me during one of our weekly visits, "in some ways, this terrible experience has brought out the best in our family. We're finally talking honestly about things that should have been addressed years ago. Jake's crimes were inexcusable, but they forced all of us to examine our own behavior and choices." The assisted living community had become a perfect fit for Grandfather Edwin's personality and interests. He had connected with other veterans, joined a woodworking group, and even started teaching financial literacy classes for residents who wanted to better understand their own financial situations. His experience with financial exploitation had motivated him to help other elderly people protect themselves from similar crimes. Amanda's trial had concluded with a conviction on multiple federal charges that would keep her in prison for the next 15 years. The prosecution had successfully demonstrated that she was the leader of a criminal enterprise that had targeted vulnerable families across multiple states. Her arrest had led to the breakup of the entire network and the recovery of assets that were returned to numerous victims. The broader impact of our case had been significant. The FBI used our experience as a model for training programs about financial crimes against the elderly. Agent Torres invited me to speak at law enforcement conferences about warning signs that family members should watch for when elderly relatives might be targets for financial exploitation. My business had continued to grow during this period, but the family crisis had given me a new perspective on what success really meant. I had always focused on building wealth and achieving recognition, but watching my family nearly destroy itself over money and status had taught me that character and relationships were far more valuable than any financial achievement. I decided to use my company's success to create positive change in the community. We established a foundation that provided scholarships for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, funded programs for elderly residents who might be vulnerable to financial crimes, and supported veterans organizations that helped aging service members maintain their independence and dignity. The foundation's work brought me into contact with many families who had experienced similar crises, and I learned that our story was far from unique. Financial crimes against elderly Americans were increasingly common, often committed by family members who felt entitled to assets or who had been manipulated by outside criminals. One of the most meaningful aspects of my foundation work was developing educational programs that helped families have honest conversations about money, inheritance, and end-of-life planning before crisis situations arose. Too many families waited until someone was vulnerable or incapacitated before addressing these important issues, creating opportunities for exploitation and conflict. As I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized that the barbecue invitation that had started this entire journey had actually been a blessing in disguise. If Jake hadn't excluded me from the family gathering, I might never have discovered his crimes until it was too late to save grandfather from complete financial devastation. The experience had taught me that real success wasn't measured by wealth, social status, or family approval. It was measured by integrity, compassion, and the positive impact you had on other people's lives. Jake had chosen the appearance of success over genuine achievement, and that choice had led to his downfall. 9 months after the confrontation in my office, I stood in Grandfather Edwin's restored garden, watching him officiate at my wedding to Sarah, my accountant, who had stood by me throughout the entire crisis. The ceremony was small and intimate, attended by the family members who had learned to value character over appearances. My parents were there, working hard to rebuild their relationships with both of their sons. Jake attended via video call from prison, offering his blessing and expressing genuine happiness for my newfound joy. Even some of the residents from Grandfather's assisted living community joined us, celebrating the triumph of love and forgiveness over bitterness and revenge. As Sarah and I exchanged vows in the garden where Grandfather had planted flowers with my grandmother decades earlier, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The pain of family rejection had led to the discovery of real crime. The investigation of financial theft had revealed the importance of genuine relationships. The confrontation with criminals had resulted in justice and healing. Standing there, surrounded by people who loved me for who I really was rather than what I had achieved, I understood the most important lesson of all. True wealth comes from building a life based on integrity, compassion, and genuine connection with others. No amount of money or social status can replace the peace that comes from knowing you've lived honestly and treated people with dignity and respect. My family's crisis had ended not with revenge or continued conflict, but with growth, forgiveness, and a commitment to building better relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. The barbecue I wasn't invited to had led to a wedding celebration that brought together everyone who truly mattered in my life. As I looked around at the faces of people who had supported me through the darkest period of my family's history, I realized that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from choosing love over hatred, forgiveness over revenge, and building bridges instead of walls. Have you ever found yourself excluded from family events because of judgments about your career or lifestyle choices, only to discover that the people judging you were hiding their own serious problems? Sometimes the family members who seem the most successful or respectable are actually the ones with the most to hide, while the people they look down on are living with genuine integrity and honor. I'd love to hear your thoughts about family dynamics, forgiveness, and what real success means to you. Please share your experiences in the comments below. Hit the like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your true worth. Don't forget to share this story with anyone who might be dealing with similar family conflicts or workplace challenges. Thank you for taking this emotional journey with me. And remember that your value as a person isn't determined by other people's opinions or social expectations. Stay true to your principles, treat people with kindness and respect, and never let anyone convince you that honest work is something to be ashamed of. Sometimes the people who judge you the harshest are the ones who need the most compassion and understanding.